Welcome to the program, everyone, and really pleased today to have Mr. Carman Pirie joining us. Carman hails from Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada, and he's the founder and head of Cooler Partners, a company that helps manufacturing companies improve their sales and marketing functions. So welcome to the program, Carman.
Steve, thanks for having me. Really a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Great. So Carman, just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you've ended up where you are today. Let's start there.
Sure. I'll give you the Coles Notes version about me, I suppose, because if we go into the how I ended up here, that could be 30 minutes on its own. But I'm a co-founder of Cooler Partners. As you said, we're an agency focused on helping manufacturers serve their customers better online and really reinvent how they do that. I've been at this for a number of years now. I've kind of been agency side, I guess, for a good chunk of my career. And I come at this weird world of marketing via an early days in politics, and then was client side marketer for a while, and then I've been an agency side for long enough to get all the gray hair to the extent that I have any left.
Okay. Oh, very good. Very good. So the background in politics, and we've also talked before about the personal branding topic and so forth. Is it politics is all about personal branding, right? I guess that is that where you started?
It's funny. I ran. Well, I don't know. I can't draw the parallel to Australia, so bear with me. But we have. I guess provincially here in Canada, we have members of the Legislative Assembly, so MLA, and I ran to be an MLA when I was 23, and I lost. But
you ran?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
And that was after I was a chief of staff to a member of parliament for a few years, in my early 20s. So I ran in an election and I lost. But what I loved about that is I had about a year where I just went door to door, knocking on doors with nothing to sell but myself. So anytime I'm talking to salespeople, especially salespeople who always sell on price, I relate to them the story about going door to door. When you only are selling yourself, you can't really sell on price, can you? You know, it has to be more nuanced than that. So I thought it was a good sales training ground for sure.
Yeah, very good, very good. I think that's that's a really interesting background to bring into marketing. All right.
I could tell you that the last part I would mention to that is the district that I ran in. A good number of people that live there would be considered heavy drinkers. So basically, I had to learn how to campaign half drunk most of the time, wandering around. So it was an interesting study on a few levels. Everybody likes to offer you a drink when you stop in to ask for their vote, it seems.
Can I ask how many votes you got, or what percentage you ended up?
I lost by 359 votes, and there were a total of 8,200 eligible voters in the district. So
fairly close.
Pretty close, yeah.
Right, okay. Well, okay, we might have just missed out on a Canadian Prime Minister or something if you'd been...
Oh, man, yeah. Now I'm completely unelectable. That's the good news. You don't have to worry about it ever again.
So Carman, you've been in this B2B marketing and sales field for some time now, and I think B2B marketing's transformed tremendously in the last 10 or 15 years. I'd like to get your views on it, but I'd say the B2B marketing function wasn't taken that seriously some time back. The key function in a B2B company was always the sales function. CEO wanted to know something about customers, they go to the sales function. But and now we have CMOs sitting at the C-suite in B2B companies, bringing a lot of value, got a lot more data, much more proactive in driving the business. So what have you seen with the evolution of B2B marketing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think probably the first big deal to happen, I don't know, maybe less than a decade ago now, was really with with inbound marketing, with this notion of using websites to convert leads, using your digital presence to actually get that sign up. That was a bit of the first shot across the bow, really, for a lot of B2B marketers, where they saw, look, I can actually begin to drive the leads to my sales organization in a meaningful way, and I'm not just relegated to doing brochures for a trade show anymore, but I can actually deliver more. And there certainly is some promise in that. I mean, it helps move a web presence from something that only converts at the very bottom of the sales process, with a contact us form, and actually, move contact capture earlier on in that customer journey. And that's great. The challenge with that is it still led, I think, B2B marketers to look at their marketing through the lens of that inbound marketing funnel that we've all heard so much about.
Yes.
And really, that's an invention that's a lot more aligned to a B2C environment than many B2B situations. If you're a SaaS company, sure, maybe the funnel thinking can kind of still make some sense depending on the SaaS company that you are. And B2C, it can make sense. And in certain B2B environments, it can make sense. But then when you get to the vast majority, in some ways, of B2B manufacturers in my world, is they're working in an environment where they have a very finite total addressable market. And if you, for instance, an example that I often cite, one of my customers, if they couldn't bring on 10 new customers next year. They just don't have the capacity. They could bring on maybe 1, 2, 3 customers next year, and each one of those customers will have a lifetime value in the several millions, and will be a multi-million-dollar customer every year, actually, when they bring them on. So if you can only bring on 3 new customers next year, what business do you have thinking about your marketing through the lens of this funnel, and then reporting on your marketing success through the lens of how much of an increase you have in organic search traffic last month, or how many new social followers you have on Twitter? None of that is at all relevant. And what we found, and you talk to B2B organizations that have a finite total addressable market, that have adopted inbound and have adopted kind of demand gen best practices and really doubled down on them, is the amazing thing you'll find is that they're successful in getting a whole huge number of marketing qualified leads.
Well, it's a real trap, isn't it?
But you'll find is that they may get a bunch of marketing qualified leads, but then 2% of them are sales qualified. So they're spending all this money on MQLs, on lead generation, on marketing the leads, and the leads that they're giving over to the sales organization, the salespeople are saying, this isn't who we want to talk to. These people can't buy. Why are you even sending them to us? It's a waste of our time to call them back. So that's been, I think, of the evolution in some ways of B2B. And so it leads us to where we're at now, which is to say, maybe now's the time that we stop marketing for leads and we start marketing to accounts instead. And that's and get that funnel thinking out of our minds. And I would suggest even start thinking about it more like a pyramid. At that very top, let's start with a very pointy tip. Who do we want to speak to? Who are the clients? Who are the target customers? And then work back from there.
Let's get into that. So I just like to get your take before we get technical on targeting specific accounts and all of that. So what does a B2B marketing function look like today? What does a good function look like? What are their sort of goals and priorities and their alignment?
I think it can look a lot of different ways, of course. There's not one size fits all. But I would say B2B marketers who are successful that I'm speaking with these days that seem to really be moving the yardsticks forward are in very, very tight alignment with their sales organizations around who are the accounts that we want to get in front of, what's important, what does that customer journey look like for these types of accounts. They've worked with sales to begin to understand that journey from the point of view of the salesperson, and they're beginning to put in place a marketing infrastructure to help support that journey, particularly early on when it's out of the visibility of sales. Those organizations are typically, those B2B marketers are measuring success fundamentally differently. They're looking at engagement rates in their target accounts, for instance. They're looking in the last 10 months and saying, how many tier ones accounts have we moved to closed one? That type of very closed loop analytics driving decisions rather than vanity metrics and good wishes, as it were.
Yeah, no, great point. Great point. So what are the implications with someone still working on inbound and generating those numbers? We see it, right? We see that the sales teams there, marketing's telling them they're doing a whole lot of great work for them, but they're not getting. There's no movement in their territory.
Yeah, that's the disconnect. When you're applying that funnel thinking, when your world actually isn't a funnel, when your world ought to be more like a pyramid and you're approaching it like a funnel, you end up sending a bunch of junk over to sales. And then, of course, the credibility that marketing just doesn't have any credibility with sales at that point. Marketing finds it very hard to move up the organizational ladder at that point.
Yes.
And they also find it's very hard to get salespeople to cooperate. Because, in order for a marketer to do their job well, they need insight into that process. And the marketers that I find that struggle are the ones that have maybe struggled for so long that sales have just stopped calling them back. They don't return the emails. They don't give them the insight and the information they need.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, and I definitely see that. And then you even see sales teams taking on their own initiatives, almost doing their own marketing activity, or queuing up at marketing store to get their budget to go and do their own activities, or maybe engaging outside agencies directly, right?
Man, marketers love that. Yeah, especially when a bunch of things get created by the sales team that are completely off brand and bastardize the logo in some way. Oh yeah, it's a.
But what do they expect? What do they expect if they're not doing all the things that you just said, right? Because the sales guys are on the hook for the number, and if the marketing guys don't feel that same, or if the sales team doesn't feel marketing's on the hook and aligned with that, they're going to do whatever it takes. They're not going to be worried about sensitivities in the marketing function.
I am having these flashbacks to an early part of my client side career when I was the director of marketing at an office furniture company. And I think some of the marketing tactics that I was implementing at the time were out of step with what should have been being done, frankly. I don't know that I should take all the responsibility for that, but 25 years ago, I think I moved past it now. But I do remember the look on the faces of the salespeople, and they were like, "What are you talking about? Why are we focused on this?" And that notion, like you say, the salespeople, they're like, "Yes, we have a number to meet." And at the end of the day, by hook or by crook, we're going to do it. So if the marketing function isn't keeping pace, then they'll move around you for sure.
Yeah. Now, we could talk all day on the challenges of sales and marketing alignment in organizations, and the siloing and all sorts of things. But let's come back to what they should be doing. And I like your idea. Yeah, marketing should focus first. Okay, what is the set of target accounts the sales team is prioritizing, and why, and even help them to sort of make that decision, right? Like ideally, marketing should have some intelligence function of sorting out who those targets are.
Well, it depends on the organization, of course, but typically, yes. You would want to work with the salespeople that even to begin to understand who typically buys your stuff now, and to what extent does our current customer base help give us the information we need from the point of view of creating the target customer profile, the firmographic data that we need in order to go out and create a target account list within whatever vertical we're going to be targeting. So you're quite right.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to start with a list somehow, and then what does marketing do with that? Ideally, so let's say we've got a universe of 100, prospective accounts. What do we do with that?
Well, the technology now really allows you to do a lot of different things. It depends on how specific you want to get. So first things first is begin to carve up that target account list and assign it and apply it against your sales organization to say, okay, typically the way it ends up working out is you have a couple of different verticals that you're trying to focus on, and there's a number of accounts within each of those. And the content, the campaign creative, if you will, and the content that you're creating around that can be then customized to that specific vertical. And then you may well have a number of accounts that are your absolute tier one priorities, where you say, we're going to create content and a campaign at the account level that's absolutely customized on a per account basis. Because the technology exists now that if I want to serve ads only to the marketing department of one organization, I can do that. If I want to serve a different set of ads to the finance department and the procurement department that I'm sending to the C-suite, and a different set again to the marketing team, I can do that and begin to surround our buying group at various steps in their customer journey. But first things first is I need to kind of define what I'm trying to do there. And to what extent am I trying to go one-to-one versus am I going maybe a little broader than that and maybe just focused on an industry or a category or on something specific, even a product that I'm promoting.
Okay, so we're going to take our account list. We want to understand if there's different verticals there and really customize our messaging to each account group. And then even within a large account, customize our messaging further for different, buyer types or profiles or job function, right? At what size does that make sense today? Does this have to be like Department of Defense size to justify that sort of verticalization or that granularity, or can you do it with a medium-sized account?
I think it would all depend on what the actual value of the sale is, really, doesn't it? I mean, sure. Depends on what you're selling and what the lifetime value of that sale is. But for most of my customers, they're dealing with a sales cycle that might be 12, 18, 24 months long, but there's a pretty big carrot at the end of that, and they're likely to keep those customers for a very long time. So the LTV is getting into the millions. So at that level, I think it's pretty worthwhile to be targeting on a one-to-one. When you start, you could just do the math and look at and look at your content creation costs and start to make those determinations if the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. Yes. If you're looking at something that where maybe you only have a $5,000 cost of is a transaction value, well, that's not something where you're going to go one-to-one. You're going to go at least one to somewhat many, with 1 to 50 or 1 to 100 accounts or something like that. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what are we doing when, okay, we've identified these accounts, we've analyzed it, we've developed messaging for those industries or those personas, say, what do you do with that?
Well, once you've mapped the customer journey and you've placed the creative against it, well, then you can use a tool like Terminus or other account-based advertising platforms to integrate with your CRM so that you can begin to serve ads into those accounts, measure their engagement and activity, and as they're leaning into an opportunity, you can begin to then trigger sales to activate into that opportunity. So it is really it's at that point where you're beginning to create the framework for sales and marketing to work together to move that nameless, faceless prospect into a closed-won customer. That can really take the shape of as you look at that customer journey and you map out the buying committee associated with it, it can be pretty complex. You also layer in buying intent data and buying intent information so that we can actually not only do we see that certain members of a buying committee are starting to engage with us, but we see that the organization overall is showing an uptick in interest in what we sell. That's another good indicator that maybe sales ought to start to get involved in that outreach.
Okay, so you're going to start measuring engagement with those key folks that you're targeting, and okay, and measuring what they're doing with you, and so what's the interface between marketing and sales as you go into those campaigns? Are you feeding back to sales? Or these accounts are engaging more, or these people are engaging? What happens there?
Well, with any luck at all, you ought to be setting that sales notification environment up to be somewhat automated within the system. Okay. So, so they're typically interfacing with that through the CRM. You're obviously working with sales at the start in a more kind of hands-on way to understand, map out the customer journey as best as you can understand it and apply your ad creative to it. And also identify when are the key points when sales ought to be notified of certain activities or levels of engagement or types of engagement, I should say. But then once you press play on that, you should have it set up so that a lot of that automation is happening within the CRM. Yeah.
Okay. Could you give me an example, Carman? Could you talk me through, even if you can't say the account name or whatever, that would be fine, but talk us through a real story here.
Well, I think probably the best way is to maybe talk through some use cases, and for B2B manufacturers, and then hopefully people can kind of just see themselves in those use cases. So for one that kind of comes immediately to mind is, I was chatting with this marketer who, the company is about a $500 million a year company, and they make control valves. Okay. And basically, he's looking to sell into the engineering departments within, or engineers within product development departments within very diverse range of sectors. And his main comment to me was, I can't find these people. Even if I find the companies that might be able to buy from me, I can find that. But then after that, I maybe know titles, and then good luck trying to find the actual contacts. Yes. These people aren't active in places like LinkedIn all that much, as an example. So that's one area where account-based advertising can be hugely helpful, because, of course, we don't need to know the exact person. We just need to know the types of titles that we're going to be advertising into, and the organization itself. So in some ways, kind of use case number one from a sales perspective for ABM is, how do you find that needle in a haystack? How do you find the unfindable prospect? Especially when you're trying to sell them something that they may not know they need yet. I'm working with somebody right now who they sell a piece of testing equipment for laboratories that replaces manual testing. Those laboratories don't know that this type of thing exists yet, so they don't know they need it. Up
saying, "Yeah, I need a new testing system or something." Right?
They're not searching for it. No. So you can be as good as you want with paid search or with organic search or what have you, but they're not searching. So how do you get in front of them? Account-based advertising is a great way to do that.
Yeah, sure. So going back to the valve, what do they sell? Control valves, like in factories or in refineries, things.
So, for instance, let's say that you are the manufacturer of suspension components for forklifts, and you're coming out with a new shock for this your suspension components, and you're looking for a new type of valve to go into that shock, and you're in that product development department doing that. That's who this person needs to talk to. and they
Yes.
have absolutely no idea how to get in front of them on a one-to-one basis from a sales guy perspective, or sales girl perspective, I should say.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's good. So what else around B2B marketing? What are some other like key initiatives B2B marketers should be taking to be more effective?
Well, I guess in addition to, and we could talk through again a lot of different use cases for ABM and how to kind of
Yeah.
think about that to be more effective, whether it's helping you gain traction into to cross sell within an account or go deeper in an account, et cetera. But if we're looking at moving a bit beyond just an account focus, I would say the one thing B2B marketers ought to be doing, and they ought to be really working with the salespeople to do this, is as they're working in this ABM framework and they're looking to create content to support that initiative, they ought to look at how can they integrate the salespeople into that content creation initiative early in the process. What can we do to give salespeople some level of visibility to our target prospects before there's an opportunity, so that people can actually begin to develop a relationship with them? I know sometimes it can feel like heavy lifting for a salesperson to be involved in the production of a podcast or in leading other content networking initiatives, but I think it's really critical, especially as the technology now exists, to get that content in front of our prospects before they know who we are. We can get salespeople creating relationships before they ever shake a hand. And that can, well, I can tell you as somebody who has his own podcast and uses it for prospecting, it can really help move a conversation along.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I know examples of salespeople. They don't have to do too much in terms of content or putting themselves out there, to really stand out and start building engagement. Like, do you have like some success stories in mind of sales folks that have gone and done that and gotten some good results?
This is a real easy one, actually, which is about as light on the content networking side as you can get. I would say almost doesn't even fit the definition.
Okay.
It is so easy. But we were working with the sensor manufacturer out of the Silicon Valley, and they make sensors for a wide variety of body sensing devices, wearable technologies, and things of that nature. So they make the sensors that go into it. So they do a huge amount of their spend on a yearly basis goes to trade events. And all we did was customize our outreach to our target account list pre-trade show by the salesperson, including all digital assets, landing pages, and things of that sort, were customized to stream in smart content that was essentially all of the information, contact information, the image, the photo, and other bio information of that salesperson. So we basically, the sales person was ever present in the digital environment that we created for prospects before the trade show. So as they were getting invited to come visit the booth, as they were getting invited to seminars or what have you, whatever the salesperson was assigned to those particular accounts, that's whose content was getting streamed into that space within the page. Amazing to watch the increase in conversion rates on that versus the generic pages that were being served up to people who weren't assigned a sales lead.
Right.
And I can tell you that we weren't long getting the other salespeople in the organization to sign up to have that same technology at their fingertips for the next trade show.
Oh, okay. So you sort of had a control group.
Well, like a lot of times, you only have one or two or three salespeople that are willing to play with you. Marketers often seek out those early allies and then go from there, and that's what happened in this case.
Wow. I think that's excellent. That's excellent.
I mean, it is so simple. It's literally just a smiling face and some introductory information at the bottom of a landing page for a content asset associated with the trade event.
So why is that successful?
Not the heavy lifting.
Why do you think that's successful? Is this about people buy from people, or what is it that makes that effective versus getting your standard invitation that's sort of all glossy and says come visit our website?
I think you're spot on. It's just a matter of people buy from people, and we've seen this time and again on conversion testing various aspects of digital creative, even so much as if you have image on the home on your website homepage, and there's a person in that image, if you put that person's eyes looking at the CTA button, so if the person that you're featuring on the website, if their eyes look at the call to action button that you want people to click, you will see an uptick in conversion rates on that page versus if those eyes are looking somewhere else. So the data shows time and again that people are really weird. And we really do, we're impacted by these things even when we don't think we would be,
Yeah, you're tapping into something inside us that makes us respond to that. So I think that's really good. All right, Carman, we're coming up to the end of our time here. So is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Look, I think I've probably rambled on enough for your audience today. But look, I would just stress, guys, I've talked to so many people who are trying to move their businesses forward. And then the next thing I ask them is, who do you want to sell to? What's your target customer profile look like? Can you give me a list of your top 100 desired accounts? And they can't do that. And if your marketing team can't do that, that's a big problem. And maybe if you're a salesperson listening to this, the best thing you can do is just give them that list and go from there if you already know who you want to sell to. But it all starts with knowing who you want to. In this day and age, the technology exists that we can just begin to get focused on who we want to buy our stuff rather than just a spray and pray marketing hope that used to be the B2B marketer's reality.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward building blocks. I'd agree with that. And yeah, people just get sort of stuck in their habit and their day to day, and they're busy, and they don't sort of stop and think about some of these basic things. And that's something I see as well. So sometimes it just takes a bit of thinking, a bit of facilitation to bring everyone together.
There's a lot of new technology out there and a lot of new techniques that marketers will need to learn in order to really put ABM to work in their organizations. But so I don't want to suggest that that's all easy, but the list creation ought to be. You ought to know who you want to sell to, and if you don't, well, that's the first thing to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Carman. Well, thanks a lot. We learned a lot today on ABM, on personal branding for salespeople, and so forth. So I think I got a lot out of that. I'm sure the audience did. So thanks again, and hopefully talk to you again soon.
My pleasure, Steve. Thanks so much.
Okay, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Great to engage with you, and look forward to talking to you more. Bye for now.